This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. You're going to want to dedicate more than 60 seconds to this episode. With me is Jamie Turner, speaker, author, thought-leading guru about how we fit into the digital world, and founder of the 60-Second Marketer. We're going to spend a lot more than 60 seconds, though, with Jamie. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Great to be here. I'm so glad you've asked me on because I have been a subscriber to your e-newsletter for so long, and I get it. I read it. I practice what you do. And I'm not kidding you. I'm not blowing smoke here because we all get a million e-newsletters, right? And mostly we hit delete, delete, delete. Yours is the one that I go, all right, wait a second. He's going to say something pretty smart in here. So I am flattered and honored to be on here and to be part of the show. So thanks for having me on.
Yes, of course. Very excited to be talking to you. So you've written a couple of books. You're on CNN all the time talking about branding. Walk us through the professional journey that brought you to doing what you're doing today, and then we'll use that as the springboard for the rest of our chat.
I will start with the end, which is I love what I do, which is about half of it is speaking around the globe, about 25% is consulting, and about 25% is teaching at Emory University and also the University of Texas. But what happened for me, true story, 20 years ago, I went in and did a guest lecture at Emory University with the person who I co-teach right now, Dr. Reshma Shah. 20 years ago, I did the guest lecture. I came off the stage and she turned to me and she said, "Do you speak professionally?" And I said, "Can you do that? I mean, is that a thing? Like people will pay you to do this? Because I love this." And she said, "Yeah, you're really good at this. You ought to do it professionally." So that was the very beginning thought of it. I really didn't make money speaking until about 10 years ago. But during the 10 years prior to that, I used it as a business development tool. So I would go to universities, I would go to local business networking events, I would do lunch and learns, I would do all of that stuff. And basically just get in front of people and talk about whatever it was I was talking about, whether it was digital marketing, whether it was entrepreneurship, it didn't matter. I would talk about it. Invariably, you come off the stage, somebody walks up to you and says, "By the way, I want you to come in and speak to our group about this topic," or "Do you consult on this topic?" And the answer was yes, yes, and yes. And so bottom line is that's how I got started. It was absolutely a blast doing it. And I've had a great journey doing it.
And where did the name and the brand 60-Second Marketer come from?
Great question. I'm glad you asked that. When I started, the 60-Second Marketer was about 10 years ago. The idea was I'm going to take complex things that are in white papers and ebooks, distill them down to 60-second blog posts and videos, and share them with people. So it was the idea of 60-Second Marketer. That's the good news. The bad news is that it turns out that Google rewards you for long blog posts. So all of a sudden I went from, do I serve the reader who wants this short thing that's basically 60 seconds long, or do I serve Google? I made the decision to serve Google to get up in the SEO ranking so that I would get a lot of traction on that front. And I've done that, but that's a constant battle for me. Is sometimes I'll do short things, sometimes I'll do longer things. And it's one of those decisions you just got to kind of tread the line and do the best you can do with both sides of the equation.
So maybe now you're like the 3, 4, 5-minute marketer.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned that because I launched a YouTube series called In 60. The idea was, again, let me try to do these things in 60 seconds. And then I took a deep dive into video, and it turns out the same thing is true. Google rewards you, and videos typically have to be about 9 minutes long. Now, there isn't a person listening to this that sat through 9 minutes of video, but Google rewards you, and it involves their algorithm and selling ad space and all that sort of stuff. I won't get into the details, but the same thing happened to me again when I dove into video about a year ago in 60, and then all of a sudden, it turns out, hey, you got to do long-form video. So sometimes I'll do the short things, sometimes I'll do the long things, but bottom line is it's this sort of crossroads that you're always trying to balance between the two.
Right, exactly. Well, let's talk a little bit about social media, digital marketing, mobile, all of these things. And I got to give you a ton of credit, Jamie, because I'm looking at your books, and I'm going to say that you were between 3 and 4 years ahead of the curve with all of these books. So the oldest book, I think, is How to Make Money with Social Media.
Yeah.
And that came out way before that was even a thing.
Yeah.
Like people like you said with the speaking, wait a minute, you can make money speaking? It's like, wait a minute, you can make money with social media? So you were really at the forefront of that. And then after that came the Go Mobile book. And some people, I think, still had the Motorola flip phones or the Razor phones, whatever that was, 2013, 2014. And so you were really at the forefront of the mobile marketing, the whole kind of mobile computing revolution. And then the digital marketing and some of the kind of insider secrets and tips and little known facts. It was a really cool collaborative book, the Digital Marketing Growth Hacks book. I think that is something that a lot of people have no idea, even today, how all of that works. And those strategies would probably be good for at least the next 2 or 3 years. But, don't buy any of these books because, God forbid you get in on this early or you actually make money using Jamie's ideas. How do you get in front of and stay in front of your topic so effectively?
That's a great question. I had a father who was in the marketing business. And as he grew older, I noticed that he was still on top of everything. Now, I was working with him in the 90s, and this was at a time when Michael Jackson was the hot, star. Britney Spears was big. Google was just invented. Yahoo at the time was a big deal. Computers were a big deal. He was always on top of everything. And I remember thinking, that guy's not growing old. He's basically decided to stay ahead of the curve and to try to contribute so that as he grows older, he can combine wisdom along with the knowledge of what's happening currently. So it was about that time that I said, I'm going to just sort of stay ahead of the curve, try to find out what's happening, try to find out where things are headed, because in the end, and this comes back to the speaking business, there's kind of broadly speaking 2 groups of speakers. There's many other sort of subcategories, but you're either talking about what's working now, which is fine. But the truth is, if you talk about what's working now, you get that kind of workshop thing. Nothing wrong with workshops, by the way. I love workshops. They're a great source of revenue and things like that. But there's those people. And then there are the people who are talking about what's coming next. Those are the keynote speakers. And those are the speakers who are ending up getting a lot of money in the long run because they're doing a lot of things that are doing all of that. So it really works out really well in terms of just trying to stay ahead of the curve on what's going on that front and doing that. And that's an intentional thing on my part.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I also want to ask you, being a democratizer and a popularizer of some of these fairly complex things, when people talk about future trends, the temptation is to be very academic, very dry, very research-based. And I think you sort of cross the line between here's the facts, here's the data, here's the science, but here's how I want you to think about it. So you are really helping people to synthesize and integrate some of these things. And again, that's why you get paid the big bucks, right? You're not just doing a book report on these future technologies. It's the data, and then here's what Jamie thinks you can do about it, or here's what Jamie thinks you can do with it.
You literally must be reading the thing I have on my whiteboard over my right shoulder here, because it says, don't tell them what to do, tell them what to think.
Yeah.
And so it's funny. And it's a note to myself saying, you can go in and say, here's how to do Instagram, but that's not that useful to people because it's very tactical. What you want to do is say, here's where Instagram is, and here's where it's going, and here's strategically how you can use it for your business. Now, the other thing that's important as a speaker is you have to make it entertaining, because if you try to go in and just download a lot of information or get too academic with things, people literally, they start counting the lights in the auditorium you're in. So the whole thing that I'm always trying to do is make sure there's a dialogue going not only between me and the audience, but between members of the audience too. So what I'm always trying to do is make sure that I'm breaking down the fourth wall, and you came out of the world of theater, so you know the idea of the fourth wall. As an actor or an entertainer or a speaker, you're trying to bring that wall down so that there's no sort of wall up between you and the audience. But the other thing that is important that a lot of people forget is you're also trying to get the individuals in the audience to break the walls down between them too. And I do that through a bunch of different things. One technique I use is, and it's intentional, to try to make people feel vulnerable. And I say, turn to the person next to you and tell them something that brings you joy in your life. Now, invariably that leads people to say, my family brings me joy, or my daughter brings me joy, or my parents bring me joy. And it's intentional because I'm trying to make people feel slightly vulnerable with the person next to them in the audience. And then that brings the wall down between them too. So it's all designed to help people understand what to think and how to think about problems. Then it's also designed to be engaging enough to where they have this vulnerability that's exposed, because when we get that emotional feeling between the speaker and the audience members amongst themselves, suddenly you've broken through and they walk out talking about you, talking about hiring you, talking about getting you into their company. Because in the end, and you point this out in your e-newsletter, your next gig is sitting in the audience you're talking to, and your goal is to get that person to go, I got to talk to this person about having him come into my office and talk about all these things too.
Hey, this interview is a real moneymaker. If you're serious about ramping up your reach and revenue as a speaker, trainer, or expert, book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. It will be the most valuable 45 minutes you invest in your speaking-driven business. Speaking of value, let's get back to the show. Well, let's talk more about this, because coming out of the world of training and my background before becoming a speaker and a coach and a consultant, I was a stand-up trainer for 10 years. I did some internal training and consulting with some big IT consulting companies and management consulting. In the world of training, there's 20 people in a seminar room, and you're doing a lot of experiential back and forth sharing, facilitating, etc. You're able to do this in front of a keynote audience of 2,000 or 3,000 people. What are some of the techniques, and then where did you learn how to do this with a very large group where most people would do the one-way data dump sage from the stage?
There's a great line about sage from the stage from an academic point of view. When you're teaching at the university level, the new idea is don't be a sage from a stage, be the guide from the side. In other words, make it a participatory learning experience for everybody. For me personally, and this is a true story, the way I got into more participatory learning was literally from sitting in audiences over the years and going, this is the most boring thing I've ever been part of. And by the way, I'm particularly not fond of panel discussions for that reason. It's unscripted, it's unrehearsed, so you get people up there unless the moderator knows what they're doing. And if you're a good moderator, you know how to get things from people. And when I moderate, by the way, I always say you're only allowed to have 30 seconds in your answer. Then that keeps people from doing these 5-minute biographies of how great they are and how brilliant they are, which drives me insane. But I sat in enough of those, or in the alternative when it's a speaker up there and they just do let me give you all the information I possibly can. And you walk out going, I know there were a lot of slides and I know there were a lot of bullet points, but I didn't walk away with anything that I remember. So the idea was just, how do I get people to participate in what I'm doing here so that I can have a conversation with them, make them have an emotional reaction to what I'm doing, because emotion is critical for a speaker. How do I get them to have an emotional reaction? Either get them to laugh, get them to cry, tell them a story that makes them feel something, so that at the end of this, they've participated with me in the educational experience that they've had.
I want to change gears just for a quick second, and maybe this goes into some of the digital growth hacking. I'll tell you a story about one of my clients, and I want to give you a little bit of kudos for something that I found online that's pretty clever, pretty smart that you did. So there was an attorney in Connecticut. I think it was a personal injury, because these guys are very creative with the marketing. And he says, I get most of my leads from SEO. People find me online. And I said, well, how do you do that? I said, well, I do it by doing something that's completely illegal and completely not allowed. And I said, well, now, hang on, you're a lawyer, you're an attorney. He goes, yeah, I know. And the law says that you are not able to make the claim that I am the best personal injury attorney in Connecticut, even if I believe that I'm the best personal injury attorney in Connecticut. I said, how do you do that? I have a whole bunch of blog posts and a whole bunch of videos that says, don't believe anyone that claims they are the best personal injury attorney in Connecticut. If someone tells you they're the best personal injury lawyer in the state of Connecticut, run the other way. And he just SEO'd the heck out of this thing.
Oh my
gosh. You can't say it. You should run away from that person. That person's not trustworthy. Never believe any of these claims. By the way, they're illegal. They're against the Bar Association rules. They're against the FTC rules. And he would cite where these things are illegal to say while saying them 4 to 5 to 6 times in each of those pieces of content. You love that, right?
I absolutely love that, because in the end, he was following the law. He was just using the tools at his disposal to do it. He didn't break any laws. I absolutely think that is brilliant.
It's a great story. Now,
it's a great story.
Here's what I did. Because, a lot of my folks are like speakers and consultants and keynoters and so on. I happen to find myself on Google, and I happen to find myself doing a search. And I think the search, and you can tell me what it is, the search was something like best motivational speakers or top keynote speakers. On the first page of Google, what do I find? I find a big, beautiful, long article by my friend Jamie Turner. And I was like, wait a second. This guy is so smart. You reminded me of my attorney in Connecticut. And it's like, you didn't put yourself number one. I think you were very humble. You're like number 17 or something out of 100. You got to have some humility. That's a digital growth hack. That is brilliant. I'm sure there's other things like that in the book that you've compiled. Tell us about some of these hacks that we might never even think of. And also maybe tell the story behind that top 100 keynote speaker, motivational speaker, how that inspiration came to you.
Yeah. Well, I had a post on my blog, 60 Second Marketer, and the one you're talking about is on my website, jamieturner.live. But on 60 Second Marketer, I had a blog post that was the top 52 social media platforms that still to this day, I think it's been on the first page of Google for 7 or 8 years now, because I constantly update it with new stuff, and Google likes it when you update things. And so I was looking at that. I also had a friend who did a post that was very similar to, sort of lengthy posts about speakers. And I was like, man, I'm going to do a big, long post on my website, on my speaker website, and just do all these motivational speakers. And I did look into, and this is, for everybody out there listening, I did a search to find out what got more search volume, keynote speaker or motivational speaker. I thought it was going to be keynote speaker, and in fact, it's motivational speaker. Yeah. So I went in and did it. It's the top 100 people. Actually, they're in alphabetical order. So I think I'm like way down at the bottom on there. And it ended up getting onto Google and all that sort of stuff. And I did have to do some work to make that happen. As people who are listening to this know, you have to have links pointing to your actual post in order for Google to say, this is really a valuable post. So I went out and I went to other people and I said, if you think this is a good post, it would be helpful to you. If you can put it on your blog and point to it, that would be great. So that helps the SEO juice. Another tactic that I didn't do that a friend of mine did, and I'm sharing this with everybody because I was like, man, this is so brilliant. But it goes back to the lawyer and what I did with the motivational speaker stuff. I have a friend who's in the speaker business, and he went out and he said he does podcasts, and his advertising for it will say, what Steve Jobs has to say about leadership, or what Ariana Huffington has to say about communication skills. And I was like, how the hell did he get Steve Jobs or Ariana Huffington and all that? And what he does is he pulls actual interviews from other interviews that they've done and drops them in and says, well, what does Steve Jobs say about leadership? It's funny that we're talking about this because he did a thing at Stanford 20 years ago, and here's what he did. And he just pulls that in. And I thought that is so damn brilliant because it ties his brand to the Steve Jobs brand or the Ariana Huffington brand and all that. And I was like, man, so there's a million little things like that out there that you just have to consistently do as a speaker or an entrepreneur or whatever it is you're doing in order to kind of get the traction you need to start showing up on people's radar screens. Because when you do show up on people's radar screens, invariably they pick up the phone or send you an email and say, hey, can you come and speak at our conference?
You must be the guy. You must be the gal. I see you all over Google. So, right, that's what we want to have happen to us. Or we see you all over social media, or I love your blog, or I love your podcast. Talk a little bit about, I think there's a compulsive need for people listening to be on all these platforms. Mm-hmm. I got to be all over Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, Snapchat, you name it. all the new ones, all the old ones. I have to hire a team. I have to hire a social media agency. I have to vomit and throw up on 17 different websites and my blog and YouTube and. How do you keep your busy executives and your busy corporations and your busy entrepreneurs that come to you for help? How do you keep them focused so they don't feel that they have to do hundreds of marketing jobs and all this monkey work?
I'm glad you asked that question because you and I are in agreement on something that you sent out in one of your e-newsletters not too long ago. And you said, guys, and this was to your speaker audience, you said, don't spend so much time on social media because in the end, it's not necessarily a good lead generation tool for you. And I agree wholeheartedly. Now, that may seem weird coming from somebody who wrote a book called How to Make Money with Social Media, but here's the truth of the matter. Nobody ever hired a speaker because of a tweet. What they do is they might come across you online in a blog post and maybe through some social media. But in the end, they have to talk to you one-on-one in order to get comfortable enough with you to hire you. So while I do support what I do, keeping out there with some social media, for me personally, and I have found that the number one thing I can do is to reach out to people one-on-one with one-on-one emails, not broadcast emails, but one-on-one emails that reference their event and say, I know you're doing your event in Las Vegas in April of 2020. I have a topic that might be of interest to you for that event. And then I name their event so that they know this is coming from a human being. Trust me, I'm a marketer. I've tried organic social media. I've tried 2 years of paid social media where I actually really, and I'm a marketer. I come from a marketing background. I knew what I was doing. I spent thousands of dollars on Facebook ads designed to quote unquote build awareness and all that sort of stuff. I don't believe I got a single lead from an ad. I did get leads from when I send an email out to people and say, by the way, here's one of my books, or here's my TV appearances, or here's my website where you can see what I'm all about. And then they look into me and go, oh, okay, you're the real deal. Let me have a conversation with you. But I am pretty confident that in 2 years of doing digital advertising, Facebook, LinkedIn, banner ads, the whole 9 yards, I'm pretty confident I can say, without a doubt, I did not generate a single lead from that. And in the end, it was a waste of money for me. So in the end, it's still about personal service business. Nobody ever hired a lawyer through a tweet. Nobody ever hired a dentist through a Facebook post. Nobody ever hired an accountant because of what they wrote on LinkedIn. They hired the accountant because it was a referral business. They got a referral or they met them one-on-one via email or something like that. So I just saved a lot of people listening 5 years of my journey going, oh my gosh, this digital stuff isn't working for me. And again, I'm a digital marketer, but I've just found that in the end, it's a professional services business that we're in. And therefore, we need to make sure we're doing the one-on-one marketing.
Super quick commercial break. Isn't this interview amazing? If you'd like to get more ideas on how to start or grow your speaking business fast, pop over to our free training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Let's talk about that. That's one of my favorite topics, and I think it's a big blind spot for a lot of professional services folks, not just speakers, but consultants, attorneys, accountants, engineers. Some people feel it's beneath them. You know, they're working in some big fancy firm, they're a lawyer, they're an architect. Like, I don't have time for this. Even though you're the breadwinner, you're supposed to be the rainmaker, bringing in business. And you're hoping that, oh, well, they'll see the ad. They'll see the billboard on the highway. They'll visit our website. They'll find us on LinkedIn. And I don't need to outreach to anybody. And what you just said is I do personal, handcrafted, highly relevant, personalized outreach to decision makers who I know can hire me and whose audiences I know I can help. How do you identify those decision makers? What's your sort of sales funnel look like as far as follow-up, and kind of walk us through a typical campaign once you found an event where you say, man, these folks could really use to hear from me?
Well, let me start with something that you started with, and you used the word that I was going to use in the question, and I want to address it. So the starting premise was, you know, there are a lot of people out there who think it's beneath them to go out and do the sales work, the hard sales work. You do have to reframe it in your mind that I'm not a salesperson. I am somebody that wants to help somebody else. And you use that word help. And I was like, you know what? That's the key word. I'm just somebody who's going out and I'm a citizen of the world and I want to help people and I want to help this person have a great event or I want to help that person have a great workshop or whatever it is. So it reframes it from I'm hustling to I'm helping. That's a key change right there. But the other thing is you'd asked at the end, how did you do it? What's your methodology? It is literally hand-to-hand combat. It takes a lot of time, but it's the only method that I've seen works. I literally go into events, find out the event, whatever event is happening, track down the email address of the people at that event. And there are ways you can do that and techniques you can do, whether it's LinkedIn or using hunter.io, which actually scours the website for their email addresses, things like that. But then I literally put them into a database, and it's not a huge database, but I work that database consistently. Now, in an ideal world, I should be spending 2 hours a day on nurturing that and doing that. I don't. I spend 4 hours a week, and I'm really angry at myself because I know, hey, I need to get out there and be doing this. But I've also make a decent living at that. But I am trying to do that. The other thing, by the way, is a little bit of advice is remember the biggest events are planned 6 months to a year out. So as a speaker, you need to be thinking 6 months in advance. So we're in the fall right now. You need to be, thinking about what am I doing now for April, May, and June. And of course, by June, the events trail off until this fall. So be prospecting with events that are 6 months to 9 months in advance and start that thing. Final point is a lot of times people don't respond. Don't take that as a no. This is a true story. I'm blessed that I get to speak around the globe. In the last year, it's been Jerusalem, Dubai, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires. I could go on and on and on, and I love it. I had a client prospect in Brazil, and I had sent them one email a month for 12 months, and I was getting frustrated. I was like, they aren't even responding. I mean, at least just say, Jamie, leave us alone. We're not going to hire you. And I almost sent one that said, can you please just tell me to stop emailing you so I can stop emailing you and wasting my time and your time? And I thought, nah, let me do one last email. I sent the one last email and got an immediate response. And they said, we've been looking at you for 12 months. We're so glad you reached out because we want to hire you for our event in 6 months. And it was a big gig. So the bottom line is, get used to that sort of no response. It doesn't mean they're ignoring you. It means that they're putting you in their folder of speakers to look at when they're hiring speakers in 9 months from now or 8 months from now or whenever it is. So I'm glad I didn't send that flame mail out and I just was patient enough to let it happen the way it was supposed to happen.
Now, when you said I sent them the last email, did you tell them very nicely that this is the last email I'm going to send?
I almost told them that not very nicely. I almost said, can you please just respond to my emails and let me know if I should stop bugging you? I mean, literally, that was like probably written on my email and I was ready to hit send. And I went, let me take a deep breath. And I said, I know you're very busy, but I just wanted to put this in front of you. This is my latest TV appearance, or this is my latest one sheet that I'm sending out to people, or this is my latest blog post that I think you might find interesting. And it's got to be relevant to them, don't forget. I'm not just sending them anything. I'm saying this is relevant to you because your event is about this topic and I happen to speak about that topic. Yeah. And that's a critical thing there too.
Let's talk about, because you mentioned about speaking and about the one-on-one prospecting and, doing the sales work. Do you find that if you use stages strategically, meaning that maybe there's a free event that is a quote unquote prospect rich audience, that you can do prospecting at scale, if you will, by talking to that audience? Let's say it's filled with CMOs. I know that a lot of CMOs hire you and a lot of marketing departments hire you to come in and consult and say, hey, Jamie, what are we doing that's missing, funky, broken, and sad? And how do we do better at it? If you went to a prospect-rich audience, let's say there's 300 people in the room, and you do the client magnet speech that you would ordinarily do, a little bit of conversion, a little bit of kind of growth hacking built into that speech, the way that we all do if we know what we're doing. Do you find that that might get you your next 4 to 5 clients, and that's a whole lot better than cold calling strangers?
100%. Totally agree with that. Your next prospect is in your audience, and it doesn't matter if it's 20 people or 200 people or 2,000 people, they are in that audience. So there's something I do that I used to not do, and I'm glad I do it now. You're always invited to the event the day before. Hey, why don't you join us at our cocktail party the night before? I definitely 100% go to those for really three reasons. Number one, I want to learn more about the industry so that I can talk specifically about their industry. And that's a mistake a lot of speakers make. They go, I'm just going to mail it in and just talk about what I talk about, my area of expertise. Unless you can go in and say, this is what's going on in your industry and these are the industry trends and this is how this stuff I'm talking about helps you, it's not going to work as well. Second thing is I always learn several people's names so I can call them out from the stage. Last night I was talking to Laura, and Laura and I were talking about this issue, and that really worked out well. And then later on I talked to Barbara, and she and I talked about this issue. And so what you're really doing is warming people up to you being on stage and being able to do that. And then I had a third point, which has escaped my brain, but I'm sure it was utterly brilliant, but I'll come up with it later. But those are two important things to remember there. There were three, ladies and gentlemen, but I can only remember two of them. But the bottom line is you're always going to need to go in and sort of nurture that crowd so that you can talk about them in a relevant way and then also throw out people's names as you go up on stage.
Well, and this might remind you of point number 3, but maybe this will be point number 3B. Are there things that you do from the stage where you're collecting leads, you're collecting email addresses, you use some onstage technology to get them to opt into your world?
I do. Let's make that point 3B. It's a very good point. And what I do, it's very simple. And I've tried everything from software platforms where it's like, open up your phone and do all this sort of stuff. In the end, I just say, here's my email address. And I make sure it's an easy one because jamie@jamieturner.live is the easiest one to remember. And I say, email me and I'll send you these slides. But I also do something that's important that I don't say, email me. What I do is say, everybody get out your cell phone. So everybody gets out their cell phone. I say, open up an email. And then they open up an email. And I say, here's my email address. So it's this process where you're getting them 90% of the way there just to say, send the email to me and I'll send you the slides. Now, invariably, the events I speak at have the slides available to them. Doesn't matter. I'm just saying, send them to me. And then I have a pre-populated program where I hit one button and it sends an email every time, somebody says, can I have the slides? And I just hit the button and it goes, thanks for asking about the slides. Here's the slides. And by the way, I do this around the globe. Feel free to reach out to me if you want anything else. Again, it goes back to what I was saying before. It is literally hand-to-hand combat. It's the only way I've known to be able to make this work. Is the air cover important? And by air cover, I mean blogging, TV, other speeches, all that. Absolutely, that's important. But in the end, I go back to what I said. Nobody ever hired a speaker because of a tweet. They hire a speaker because they had a conversation with you, said, this person knows what they're talking about. They're trustworthy. They're going to show up on time. They're going to deliver what they're supposed to deliver. And I'm ready to work with them. And that's how it all works.
Love it. Well, Jamie, as we're wrapping up, I'm going to have two final questions for you. The final question is, how do people plug in and get more of the Jamie Turner brilliance that we've shared on the show so far? And then even before we get to that, if people were to take one central idea from our conversation today about marketing and sales and the digital world and the offline world, what do you hope that one central marketing idea or theme might be?
The main thing that I tell everybody, whether I'm teaching at the university level or teaching professionals at a speech, is as a marketer, the most important thing is to get inside the mind of the person that you're talking to. If you think about why we all buy Starbucks coffee, it's not because we want to pay $4.50 for a strong cup of coffee. It's because we want the experience of Starbucks. We want the smells, the sounds, the kind of energy that's at a Starbucks. That's what we're buying. And so in order to understand how to sell something, you have to start by getting inside the mind of your prospect and then working backwards from there. And as a speaker, the same thing holds true. If you want to get hired, think through what's on the mind of the event planner. They're stressed out. They're nervous that they're going to hire the wrong person. All of that stuff. Solve that problem for them and work backward from there. The second question that you asked, and thank you for asking that, is where do we get more information about you? Several sources. If you go to 60secondmarketer.com, 60, and then the word second, and then the word marketer.com, you'll see my blog. I also have a YouTube series called In 60. If you literally just go in and Google Jamie Turner in YouTube, or just Google Jamie Turner anywhere, and you'll find information about me. And then finally, my website for my speaker business is jamieturner.live, JAMIE jamieturner.live. But thank you for asking that. Always happy to hawk my goods. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. And in case you're in your car, in case you're out walking the dog, all of these links that Jamie just shared will be on the website under this episode at thespeakingshow.com. Well, Jamie Turner, you're awesome. I am so glad we got to reconnect here, and much, much more to come. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, David.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.